What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. In today's video, I want to get into a surprise choice from the NFL Draft Network or just the Draft Network. I forget what they're called. I believe it's just the Draft Network. My apologies. A surprise choice from the Draft Network on the 2024 New York Jets make or break player. They select one individual from each team, and for the New York Jets, I was surprised to see Jeremy Ruckert listed as the make or break guy for the Jets entering his third season in the NFL. I spoke with Anthony Rivardo on Big Apple Blitz earlier today about this subject and wanted to share my thoughts on why I think it's unfair to call this a make or break season for Jeremy Ruckert. The Draft Network put out an article yesterday about Jets' third-year tight end Jeremy Ruckert that I found interesting because they listed him as a make or break player, that it was kind of now or never for Jeremy Ruckert. And I was a little bit confused by that. This same outlet also kind of said the same thing, almost word for word about Jermaine Johnson last year. And I think it's even crazier to say it's a make or break season in year two for a player. And then Jermaine went out and had a Pro Bowl season. Now, for Jeremy Ruckert with Tyler Conklin on this roster, I don't think he is going to have the same sort of reps that Jermaine Johnson did last year, being that Johnson was a starter. And unless there's an injury, Jeremy Ruckert won't be. But without CJ Uzama this year taking up a roster spot, I do think we see more of a role for Ruckert this year as a tight end too. And I think there still is upside that we've seen with him so far in his first 2 years. So I'm not out on Jeremy Ruckert, and I think it was a little, maybe a touch on the harsh side to classify this as a make or break season for him.
I think that it's always a little bit harsh to classify any second season as a make or break. I think the only position in football where that maybe could be accurate is if you're talking about a quarterback. Like if
Yeah.
you're talking about Bryce Young going into a make or break season, okay, sure, I think you can justify that. But for a tight end or a pass rusher, so to speak, because we were kind of just talking about Kayvon going into year three, I mean, these guys are young and those positions, they really do take a while to develop into. I mean, think about what goes into being a tight end. You're a blocker, you're a pass catcher. You do so much on every single play in an offense, and to have all that responsibility expanded upon once you go from college to the NFL, it takes time. And tight ends often do take a good while to develop. I mean, even if you want to look at the Giants, recently retired Darren Waller, how about all the development that he had to take before he finally had his breakout? He's with the Ravens as a receiver, then he bounced around to the Raiders, eventually became a Pro Bowl level tight end. Give these guys time, these young players. I think that in the NFL in particular, and especially in New York sports and New York football fans, the patience has been lacking for some of these young players, and they're expected to make that impact year one, year two, and if not, then they're done, they're busts. But I don't know, for Jeremy Ruckert going into his second season, let's see, give him a chance, give him some time to develop and maybe realize that potential. I think that he could be a pretty solid player for the Jets this season.
Yeah, I think so too. And tight ends, as you mentioned, is a position that sometimes takes a little bit. There's two semi-recent examples of this with Dawson Knox in Buffalo. Really didn't become the guy we know him as until year three. And someone that you know pretty well from his time in Dallas, Dalton Schultz, really didn't become a mainstay in that offense until his third year in the league. So for me, I think tight ends deserve a little bit of a leash, especially someone who is taken in the third round. Him sitting behind two veterans in Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzama, I think is, only going to benefit his game. And he's been a factor as a blocker. I think we'll see him more as a blocker this year, even because I'd be surprised if they end up carrying a fullback with just how this roster is. So I think those snaps that were going to Nick Bawden will also be going to Jeremy Ruckert in kind of that H-back role. So I think he gets on the field more that way, but like also we've talked about it with when mentioning Tyler Conklin or just pretty much any receiver on the Jets over the last 2 years. How can we judge him fully with the quarterback play that they've had the last 2 seasons, whether it was Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, Joe Flacco, Mike White, whoever? It's not like they were in the best quarterback situation either.
No, 100% true. I think kind of how we were talking about systems can pull a player back and hold them back, or help maximize their potential, players that they're playing alongside also have that effect. I mean, whether we're talking about Kayvon Thibodeau now having a breakout because he's playing alongside Brian Burns, or if we're talking about Jeremy Ruckert having a breakout because he has Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football rather than Zach Wilson, it makes a difference how accurate the pass is, how timely the pass is, and whether or not he's getting the ball on plays that are designed for him. You know, sometimes quarterbacks don't read the field properly and don't throw to the open receiver and the right receiver. Maybe Ruckert has had opportunities left on the table from him because of the poor quarterback play. And I think you can make that argument for even Garrett Wilson, who went for 1,000 receiving yards last season. I'm sure that he had a whole lot more yards left on the field where the ball was inaccurate or just didn't go his way when it should have. So I think that is a really good point that Aaron Rodgers not only is going to give the Jets potential to bounce back and potentially have a huge upcoming season where they make the postseason, but he's also going to create breakout opportunities and break points for other players in the offensive lineup.
Yeah, Peter chimes in and says Ruckert will thrive being tight end too, even if some of it's blocking for Brees and company, and then follows it up with, it's been nice seeing Ruckert develop the last 2 years. And, you know, part of it too, I think, has to be the rest of the 2022 draft class. Like the Jets' first 4 picks from that class, Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, Jermaine Johnson, have all come into the league and kind of popped right away, while a guy like Ruckert really hasn't yet. And again, like, not all of that's on him. I think some of it is circumstantial. We've seen him play well in the preseason. He has a couple preseason touchdowns. So I think it's only a matter of time before he's, again, I'm not saying a star or anything like that, but a useful piece in this offense as a role player, blocker, and every once in a while getting in on the passing attack.
Absolutely. And for what it's worth, I think you kind of made a good point earlier mentioning Dawson Knox and Dalton Schultz, like some of these guys who you can point to and say the hit rate on mid-round tight ends is pretty solid. You know, a lot of the tight ends in the NFL who start and who develop into good players, they are found in the middle rounds, but they do take a little while to develop. So you got to give Ruckert a little bit more time and see if he finds an opportunity to become a focal point in the offense. And then what does he do with that opportunity? I think that you could feel pretty good about his potential as a mid-round pick at the tight end position, whereas sure, for quarterback, the majority of the starters are first-round picks, and it's kind of tough to see those mid-round guys develop, but every position is different, and for tight ends in particular, mid-round picks usually pan out and become good players, but they just take a little bit of time. And so for Ruckert, I think it's just about finding the opportunities. The Jets' offensive coaching staff giving him more opportunities and more to work with. I think it'll hopefully lead to him developing into a pretty high-quality player.
Yeah, and unfortunately, not crazy high on this Jets offensive coaching staff with Nathaniel Hackett and Todd Downing and Keith Carter and names like that. But I will say the Jets tight end coach is very well respected. He actually was a coach for the Senior Bowl a couple of years ago. And when Robert Saleh was out with COVID in, I guess that was 2021, Ron Middleton led the Jets to win, which was exciting.
100%. I think that definitely gives you a little bit more confidence in Ruckert, knowing that you have a good tight ends coach. And again, it ties into Aaron Rodgers, knowing that you have a good quarterback throwing the ball and calling the plays. I think that's also a big part of it. It's not just about getting the ball timely and accurately to the receivers, but it's the fact that Aaron Rodgers, he gets the freedom to call those plays at the line of scrimmage and to change things around, where Zach Wilson probably wasn't given that freedom from the coaching staff. And if he was, they probably didn't feel too confident in his abilities to run the offense and call hot routes and audible at the line of scrimmage. But it's Aaron Rodgers. Like, he knows football. He knows how to put his players in position to succeed. He'll call the plays at the line of scrimmage. He'll make the changes, and those players will be better off for it. And that will include guys like Mike Williams. If Rodgers is telling him with a hand signal, go run a back shoulder fade and make a reception 30 yards downfield, or if he's telling a guy like Jeremy Ruckert to run out into the flat because he sees an opening because of a cornerback blitz, flip him the ball and let him pick up 10, 15 yards a pop. So Aaron Rodgers is going to make that difference. So meanwhile, we probably feel like Nathaniel Hackett might hold this team back a little bit. Aaron Rodgers can make up the difference, call those plays at the line, and put his teammates in position to succeed. And again, that might lead to the breakout of more than one player in this offensive lineup.